The Homeowners Association had just made a $47,000 mistake, siphoning it from my 82-year-old grandfather and now trying to steal his home. They thought they were targeting a frail, confused Korean War veteran. What they didn't realize was they had just picked a fight with his granddaughter, a cybersecurity professional who tracks digital footprints for a living. Every shady fee and fraudulent transfer leaves a trace, and I know exactly how to follow it. They declared war on the wrong family. Tell me in the comments if you've ever faced a nightmare HOA, because what I'm about to uncover will shock you. My name is Riley Carter. I'm 34, and before this domestic disaster unfolded, I truly believe the greatest threats to my family's safety came from overseas cybercriminals, not the neatly trimmed tyrants living just a few blocks away. Life had thrown me off course. A divorce I never saw coming left me adrift both emotionally and financially. Moving back in with my grandfather, Henry, was meant to be temporary, a safe harbor, while I regrouped, close to the one man who had always been a steady father figure. Henry had been the cornerstone of Willowbrook Estates for more than 40 years, long before the neighborhood was transformed into a status symbol. Back then, it was a close-knit community where people borrowed sugar, fixed cars together, and truly looked out for one another. Henry's house sat on a desirable corner lot, but the real prize was his sprawling vegetable garden. It was his masterpiece, bursting with tomatoes as big as softballs, crisp cucumbers that could feed an entire family, and herbs so fragrant they could stock a small market. My grandfather had magic in his soil-stained hands. Every morning, the crunch of autumn leaves under his worn leather boots was the neighborhood's alarm clock as he strolled through his garden, coffee mug in hand. That garden wasn't just a hobby. It was his sanctuary, his living connection to my late grandmother, Eleanor. They had planted the first seeds the day they moved in. But in 2019, the soul of Willowbrook began to shift. New money flowed in. Modest ranch homes were replaced with oversized cookie-cutter mansions, and practical trucks were traded for gleaming luxury SUVs that never touched a dirt road. And with this change came Miranda Blackwell. Miranda, a high-powered real estate agent, spoke of protecting property values with the fervor of a preacher talking about salvation. At 52, with meticulously maintained blonde highlights and a dazzling but hollow smile, she bought the largest new build on Maple Drive. Immediately, she launched her campaign to restore order. "We need standards," she'd declare at her coffee gatherings on her immaculate lawn. "We must protect our investments." Within 6 months, Willowbrook Estates had its very first HOA. The vote was scheduled during a freak snowstorm right before Thanksgiving, when many longtime residents couldn't even leave their homes. It passed, and just like that, Miranda crowned herself president of the new association, armed with the power to fine, threaten, and harass anyone who didn't fit her vision of suburban perfection. The first attack on my grandfather came in the form of a letter. Official-looking, embossed with the HOA's logo, it declared Henry's 40-year-old vegetable garden a non-compliant landscaping feature, and slapped him with a $500 fine. Rage burned in me when he showed me that letter. This garden wasn't just plants, it was his pride, his daily meditation, his way of keeping Eleanor's memory alive. But Miranda wasn't finished. The next letter was even crueler. It demanded the removal of Henry's wheelchair ramp, which he had painstakingly built himself in 2018 after a mild stroke. According to the HOA, the ramp was an architectural violation that detracted from neighborhood aesthetics. That ramp had been Henry's declaration of independence. He had measured, cut, and hammered every board himself over 3 long weeks. I remembered his voice filled with pride when he called me overseas to tell me it was finished. Now, shaking hands clutching the letter, his voice broke as he whispered, "Maybe they're right, Riley. Maybe I'm just too old to keep up." That was the moment I understood this wasn't about gardens or ramps. It was a deliberate strategy to push out the original homeowners, an organized campaign of elder displacement, dressed up as neighborhood improvement. And I was not about to let that happen. 2 weeks after I moved back, Miranda launched her next attack, this time at Henry's pride and joy, his 1970 Ford F-150. That truck was more than transportation. It was part of who he was. A classic Navy workhorse with more character than most novels, its dented bed had hauled lumber for half the porches in the neighborhood, delivered Christmas trees to families who needed them, and doubled as a loaner moving van whenever someone was in a pinch. The bright red toolbox bolted to the back had built tree houses, fixed leaky faucets, and probably saved more marriages than counseling. But under Miranda's freshly minted vehicle aesthetics policy, Henry's beloved pickup was now labeled a commercial vehicle stored in a residential zone, punishable by $200 per day until it vanished from the driveway. I watched from the kitchen window as Miranda, phone in hand, circled the truck snapping photos like a crime scene tech. The faint diesel smell mingled with fresh-cut grass as Henry, unaware, started the engine, its familiar rumble, the sound of dependable mornings for 4 decades. That evening, Miranda posted the pictures on the official community Facebook page with a caption crafted to incite outrage. Residents of Willow Brook. This is what happens when we don't enforce standards. Our property values are everyone's responsibility. Let's protect our investments. The newer arrivals piled on, sneering that no buyer would touch a neighborhood with that rusting heap in view. But people who assume they're the smartest in the room make a common mistake. They underestimate the person quietly doing the homework. While Miranda played social media warrior, I did what I do best. I dove into records. HOA creation is bound by strict legal procedures, and state law isn't optional. I pulled the articles of incorporation, the ballot logs from that blizzard-buried Tuesday, and every proxy authorization tied to it. What I found was blatant fraud. Only 40% of eligible households had actually voted to create the HOA. State law required 51% for a legitimate quorum. Miranda had bridged the gap using proxy votes from snowbirds, seasonal residents wintering in warmer states. The smoking gun? Those proxy signatures were electronic, allegedly submitted through a secure portal. The metadata on the signature files was damning, all generated on the same computer from the same IP address, geotagged to a coffee shop 2 towns over within a 6-hour stretch, and 3 days after the meeting had already happened. I documented every irregularity, compiled it into a formal complaint, and filed it with the state agency that oversees homeowners associations. Knowledge Nugget 1. HOA authority isn't limitless. Formation demands strict compliance with state statutes, including majority approval from eligible owners. Always verify vote counts and proxy authenticity. Miranda's counterpunch landed fast and dirty. Within 48 hours, Henry received another letter dripping with counterfeit authority, claiming he had never paid the mandatory one-time HOA initiation fee of $2,000, 0 cents. The invoice was backdated to 2019 and, to my horror, included what looked like Henry's digital signature authorizing payment. He stared at the screen, bewildered and shaken. "Riley, I've never signed anything electronically in my life." "I wouldn't know how," he insisted. That's when the first chilling pieces of a much bigger puzzle slid into place. Someone wasn't just harassing my grandfather, they were stealing his digital identity. And I was about to learn how deep this went. Miranda's third strike came disguised as public safety. An anonymous complaint was filed about the structural integrity of Henry's roof, triggering a demand for a professional inspection estimated at $15,000, with a threat of $5,000 per day and penalties for non-compliance. From the moment Miranda arrived with her chosen inspector, the setup was obvious. The man was shifty, distracted, and more interested in his phone than the roof. When I asked for his credentials, he fumbled before producing a flimsy business card. Blackwell Inspection Services. The same last name as Miranda. Coincidence? Hardly. Pressing further, I asked for his state contractor license number. More fumbling. He muttered about waiting on a renewal. Right there in the driveway, I called the state licensing board. Within minutes, the truth was confirmed. No such company existed, no license was pending, and performing paid inspections without one was a felony. His nervous sweat mixed with the earthy scent of Henry's compost as he packed up in defeat. Days later, I hired a legitimate structural engineer who spent hours reviewing the property and gave Henry's roof a glowing report. No surprise, since Henry had poured the foundation himself decades ago. But Miranda pivoted instantly, abandoning the roof narrative and manufacturing a new emergency: rodents from Henry's compost pile. The so-called photographic evidence? Blurry stock images lifted from the internet, watermark and all. Yet another bogus fine, this one for $5,000. The only rats here were walking on two legs. That's when our first ally arrived. Evelyn Parker, a 78-year-old retired teacher from down the street, knocked on Henry's door carrying a bulging manila folder. "Riley," she said, her eyes sharp as ever, "I've been documenting everything Miranda has done to the seniors here for 6 months. What's happening to Henry is just the tip of the iceberg." She laid out her evidence, and a disturbing pattern emerged: systematic harassment of elderly residents. The Johnsons on Pine had been targeted with the same fake roof scam. The Washingtons, in their 80s, received identical pest citations for a bird feeder. Each case zeroed in on seniors who lived alone, had little family support, and weren't tech-savvy. Knowledge nugget 2. When an HOA demands costly inspections or repairs, always demand the contractor's license and insurance. This information is public record and easily verified. But Evelyn's notes revealed something darker. Every targeted senior mentioned a helpful young man from the HOA who had offered to set up online banking and digital tools for easier dues payments. The same young man who had helped Henry just 2 months before I returned. Soon after, Miranda escalated again. This time against Henry's solar panels, installed in 2015 with full city permits. Suddenly, they were deemed unauthorized connections that had to be removed within 30 days, with fines of $1,000 per day. Never mind that the HOA committee didn't exist back then. Henry had the paperwork, the stamps, the approvals, all in order. But Miranda doubled down, leveraging her cousin in city code enforcement to issue a violation notice for the same panels. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just HOA overreach. It was coordinated corruption, with Miranda's family pulling strings inside local government. The deeper I dug, the uglier it became. HOA financial records showed consulting payments funneled to Blackwell Development Group LLC, Miranda's shell company, every time an elderly resident paid a large fine or sold a home under duress. Then Henry's latest bank statement stopped me cold. $8,000 in retroactive monthly HOA fees had been drained automatically from his checking account, backdated to 2019. The HOA produced authorization forms, complete with his forged digital signature. Henry's hands shook as he pointed to the withdrawals. "Riley, I've never set up automatic payments. I pay everything by check." Every single fraudulent transfer shared the same IP address, logged at the same times, late Friday nights and weekends when banks were closed and confirmations delayed. Knowledge nugget 3. HOA rules and fees cannot be applied retroactively to existing improvements. Attempts to do so are both invalid and often signs of fraud. That night, I tore into Henry's computer, determined to trace the intrusion. The malware was sophisticated, buried deep, disguised as legitimate Willowbrook Suite compliance software. It logged keystrokes, captured passwords, duplicated signatures, even took screenshots during online transactions. The installation record showed it had been added on a Saturday afternoon, the exact day that helpful young man visited Henry. Tracing its command server led me straight to the culprit, Tyler Blackwell, Miranda's 24-year-old son. He marketed himself as a cybersecurity consultant specializing in senior protection, but what he really did was install digital crowbars into the lives of vulnerable elders. Every house call was an infection. Every infection, a pipeline to financial ruin. I uncovered a web of compromised seniors across 3 counties, at least 47 victims, and nearly $400,000 stolen. The common thread: Tyler's help, followed by HOA harassment and drained accounts. Henry stared at the evidence, tears in his eyes. "So I'm not losing my mind? I didn't authorize those payments?" I squeezed his shoulder. "No, Grandpa. You've been targeted by a cruel, calculated scam designed to make you think you were forgetting." Evelyn wept when she saw the proof. Tyler had installed the same malware on her laptop, too. This wasn't just harassment anymore. It was predatory elder fraud, using the HOA as cover and weapon. And Miranda's company had already acquired 12 homes through this scheme. Knowledge nugget 4. Never let someone with a vested interest install software on your personal computer. Legitimate security comes from trusted companies, not door-to-door helpers. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something shift inside me. Not just anger, but a clear sense of purpose. My cybersecurity skills weren't just relevant anymore. They were the key to dismantling this entire operation. But I knew I couldn't do it alone. To take down a network this coordinated and corrupt, I needed allies with expertise in law, finance, and exposure. It was time to build a task force of my own. Evelyn became my director of human intelligence. At 78, with the investigative instincts of a seasoned detective, she had already done months of groundwork. Her weekly coffee meetups with the neighborhood seniors transformed into intelligence briefings where victims shared their stories and gathered their own evidence. Detective Ryan Kowalski, a former colleague from my cybersecurity consulting days, had since joined the state police's financial crimes division. When I showed him the case, his eyes lit up with grim recognition. "Riley, what you found isn't just local. This pattern of malware and HOA pressure matches reports we've been getting across 3 counties," he said. Tyler and Miranda weren't working alone. They were part of something larger. Our legal weapon was Marcus Hale, a civil rights attorney specializing in elder abuse and RICO violations. When I spread the evidence across his desk, his reaction was immediate. "This isn't just fraud," he said, leaning forward, energized. "This is racketeering, a criminal conspiracy. We can pursue them under federal law, asset forfeiture, treble damages, the whole arsenal." The last piece of the puzzle was journalist Julia Sanchez, an investigative reporter for the local station who had covered HOA abuses for years. She knew how to time a media strike for maximum impact and protection of victims. Together, we built a 3-pronged strategy. First, legal action. A sweeping civil lawsuit backed by law enforcement to halt the fraud, recover funds, and dissolve the corrupt HOA. Second, media exposure. A carefully timed report that would reveal the scam to the public, warning others across the state. Third, law enforcement coordination. A joint operation with state and federal agencies to ensure arrests stuck. Marcus explained our leverage, pattern evidence. Instead of dozens of scattered cases, we'd present it as a single criminal conspiracy. Under RICO, damages could be tripled and the defendant's assets seized. Ryan focused on digital forensics. Tyler's malware logs were essentially time-stamped confessions, documenting every keystroke and stolen password. Julia worked on the media rollout, holding the story until the moment arrests were made. Meanwhile, Evelyn led a cyber safety workshop at the local library, a cover to teach seniors how to recognize the fraud. 23 residents showed up, laptops in hand. Every machine was infected with Tyler's malware. Marcus began drafting asset forfeiture paperwork, targeting Miranda's company, her cars, her home, everything purchased with stolen funds. Ryan looped in federal investigators, confirming the operation crossed state lines. This wasn't just about Willowbrook anymore. It was about protecting vulnerable seniors everywhere. But our greatest weapon was Miranda and Tyler's arrogance. They still believed they were untouchable, convinced they were winning. That made it easy to let them dig deeper, piling up evidence against themselves. And dig they did. With desperation thick as smoke, Miranda called a sudden emergency HOA meeting to vote on foreclosing Henry's house in 72 hours. No due process, no legality, just a sham vote, invoking made-up emergency provisions. The very next morning, Tyler tampered with Henry's electrical panel, creating a fire hazard that the HOA would cite as justification for immediate condemnation. But this time, the cameras I'd installed caught everything. Tyler's face, his hands loosening the wires, the sabotage in progress. And Tyler wasn't finished. I caught him headed straight for Evelyn's home, laptop bag in hand, planning to install an updated version of his malware. He never saw me waiting. "Tyler Blackwell, I presume?" I said as he froze in the glow of her garden lights. He stammered, trying to pass it off as a misunderstanding, but the bag of USB drives told the real story. Evelyn opened her door, her sharp voice cutting through the night. "We won't be needing your help anymore." His mask of charm crumbled instantly. Meanwhile, Miranda's cousin, the corrupt inspector, appeared at Henry's with a formal condemnation notice, citing the very hazards Tyler had staged hours earlier. But Detective Ryan was already parked across the street recording everything. The collusion, the fraud, the crime. Knowledge Nugget 6. Homeowners can legally install cameras on their own property, and those recordings are invaluable in proving harassment, trespassing, and fraud. That afternoon, Miranda tried a final act of intimidation. She went door-to-door spinning lies, claiming I was the real abuser, isolating Henry and manipulating his finances. What she didn't know was that half the neighbors she targeted were wearing tiny recorders provided by Detective Ryan. Every word of her smear campaign was preserved. At the same time, she filed an emergency restraining order against me, painting me as an unstable, greedy granddaughter seizing control of my grandfather's life. Tyler amplified the attack online, spreading slander across neighborhood forums about my military past and fabricating financial exploitation stories. Meanwhile, the HOA scheduled an emergency auction of Henry's home for the following Friday. Naturally, Miranda's real estate company was already lined up to handle the sale. But every step was anticipated. I let her believe the restraining order had silenced me, while Marcus handled everything through legal channels. We moved Henry to a safe, temporary assisted living facility, keeping him out of the direct line of fire. "Riley," he said with heavy resignation, packing his small bag, "maybe I should just sell. I'm tired of fighting." I squeezed his hand. "This isn't a retreat, Grandpa. It's a repositioning. And when this is over, you're going home." Evelyn stayed behind as my eyes and ears, reporting Miranda's unraveling behavior. Day drinking, wild accusations, paranoia. Ryan finalized the warrants, linking Tyler's malware operation to cases across state lines, making it a federal cybercrime investigation. Marcus completed the massive lawsuit and asset seizure filings, and Julia's crew prepared for the moment of exposure. By Friday morning, everything was in place. The annual HOA meeting had drawn the largest crowd Willowbrook had ever seen. Residents packed the community center, buzzing with curiosity. Julia's news team set up quietly in the back. Miranda stood at the podium in a crimson power suit, radiating smug triumph. She clicked through PowerPoint slides showing success stories of problem properties removed, unveiling an architectural rendering of a modern duplex on Henry's lot. "Ladies and gentlemen," she declared, voice dripping with satisfaction, "today marks a glorious new chapter for Willowbrook Estates." Camera flashes illuminated her smile. That's when I walked in, flanked by Detective Ryan and 2 federal agents. The room fell into stunned silence as badges glinted under the lights. Miranda's smile froze, then collapsed entirely as Ryan's voice thundered. "Miranda Blackwell, you are under arrest for violations of the RICO Act, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, and felony elder abuse." Tyler tried to bolt the side exit but was intercepted and cuffed by 2 more agents. The sharp metallic snap of handcuffs echoed through the room. I stepped forward, connected my laptop to the projector, and replaced Miranda's slide with the evidence. Bank records showing nearly $400,000 stolen, screenshots of Tyler's malware capturing keystrokes, and recordings of Miranda discussing her plan to clean out the old folks. Gasps swept through the audience. Evelyn rose from the front row, her teacher's voice ringing out, "I have documented every single fine, every act of harassment, and every intimidation tactic for 6 months. 47 of our neighbors were victims." Miranda's meltdown was caught in high definition as she screamed about conspiracy and persecution, her polished facade crumbling. "You want to talk about property values?" I told the crowd as Tyler wept in cuffs. "They just went up. Because we proved bullies and thieves don't belong here." Ryan took the podium again to announce that thanks to forensic evidence, over $380,000 in stolen assets had been frozen and would be returned to the victims. The room erupted in applause. And then, the most powerful moment of all. Henry walked slowly through the doorway, steady and strong, greeted by a standing ovation. He took the microphone, his voice clear. "This is what happens when a community stands together. And this," he turned to wink at me, "is what happens when my granddaughter gets mad." 6 months later, Willowbrook was transformed, not by forced conformity, but by real community. Miranda and Tyler were sentenced to 5 years in federal prison with restitution. The HOA was dissolved, its fraudulent liens voided, and the 12 homes seized under duress were returned to their rightful owners. Henry came home to find the entire street throwing him a welcome block party. Evelyn was unanimously elected president of a new voluntary association under one condition. Every meeting must include coffee and her famous oatmeal raisin cookies. Her first program was a senior watch, not for burglars, but to teach residents how to spot scams. Henry's garden thrived again, now with a kids' corner where neighborhood children learned to grow their own food. I stayed for good, opening a cybersecurity business focused on protecting seniors. Demand was overwhelming. Ryan and I discovered our professional partnership carried over into personal life. He proposed one Sunday morning right there in Henry's garden. Together, we launched Walter's Warriors, a nonprofit offering free tech support and fraud protection for seniors. We built partnerships with banks, law enforcement, and senior centers. The annual Henry Carter Community Festival now celebrates resilience, community, and vigilance, funding scholarships for students studying cybersecurity in exchange for teaching seniors digital safety. Henry's daily walks, his ramp, his tomatoes, they became symbols of a neighborhood reborn. "You know what I've learned, Riley?" he asked one evening as fireflies danced in the garden. "Sometimes the best way to protect what you love is to fight for it. And the most important part of the fight is remembering, you're not alone." The smell of basil and the sound of children's laughter carried through the air, reminders of why we fought and why we won.